indeed. Well, I'm joined now by Martin Newman, a retail expert with 37 years experience working with brands such as Ted Baker, Harrods and Pandora. Thanks very much for coming in. What do you make of all of this? What's your reaction then to today's news?
Well, it's been interesting. I think many people didn't know what way it was going to go, so it was quite hard to call. Obviously, the news in the last few days has been that a number of landlords weren't necessarily, one of the major landlords, and two wasn't going to vote in favour of it. So clearly there's been a lot of negotiation going on behind the scenes. And ultimately, I think it's a very good outcome. I mean, I think at the end of the day, the downside of a business the size of Arcadia, of the CVA not going through, you risk 18,000 jobs, you risk the business being broken up, possibly being picked up piecemeal by, other people in the industry. But I can't help thinking it would have been a bad outcome overall.
Yeah, great news for the staff, great news for the high street
Absolutely.
as well. But I guess the next question is, it's bought Arcadia more time. Is it long enough, do you think, for them to be able to turn themselves around?
Well, I think it depends on, it depends on the market. I think the market has to realise, and when I say the market, I mean landlords, I mean institutional investors and anybody else that's involved in the big national retail chains. They have to give people time. The reality is things are changing. Online is obviously growing at a pace. Consumer behaviour is changing, but we live in a multi-channel world, and the role of stores is still relevant. But I think with what's happened with Arcadia is really what's happened with Debenhams and a lot of other of the big national chains, and that is they just were a little bit slow to change, and ideally they would have been making this move probably 3 or 4 years ago, because if you've already got 25 or 30% of your sales online, which I believe is the case for a lot of the brands in Arcadia, then arguably you've got too many stores, because most of that growth online or the sales online is channel shift, where customers have decided to go online rather than in store. It's not necessarily incremental.
Yeah, and with Arcadia saying, they're going to pay less rent, I mean, is that going to set a bit of a precedent now for other shops and stores that are struggling? They're going to go to their landlord and say, well, look, we're struggling here, we need to pay less rent.
They may well do, but I think landlords also have to realise that, that the world has changed. And I think it seems to me like in the past there was a mentality whereby often there was no movement on behalf of the landlords and they'd be happy enough just to leave the stores empty. But, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because the more empty stores there are on a high street, the less reason there is for consumers to go there. So I think they need to recognise, and I think some of them are, that they have to be more flexible, both with, with the rents, with the rates, but also the usage of the spaces, making them available to smaller independent retailers, making them available for pop-ups, maybe for online businesses who also want to go into brick and mortar.
So Philip will be breathing a sigh of relief, won't he, this afternoon? What about his future?
Well, I don't really know what Sir Philip's future is, but, as the figurehead of the business, I mean, I think Arcadia historically has been an innovator. They were arguably one of the protagonists of fast fashion in the UK. Yeah, they've done a lot of great things over the years, collaborations with Rihanna, they've, created great product. I think they need to go back to basics, and they need to go back to thinking about what made us so great 4 or 5 years ago, and how do we get back to that? And he's the figurehead of the business, so who better to drive that transformation?
You've worked with so many different stores, so many different brands over the years. Who do you think gets it roughly right now? Gets the online world right, but also gets their stores right? Because it's a very tricky balance, isn't it?
You're absolutely right. It's a very tricky balance indeed. Somebody like Selfridges, I think has a great online experience, a fairly significant level of online sales, north of, I think, 500 million now. But obviously you go to Selfridges, into any of the Selfridges stores, and it's a fantastic customer experience. The stores are really well merchandised, service is great. They've got a very good joined up multi-channel proposition. So they'd be arguably as good as anyone else out there at the moment.
Great to get your insight and thoughts. Martin Newman, retail specialist. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Good to see you.